a sister sent in her experience. She returned with message that will expose a dark secret of many churches concerning tithe and the shocking truth Jesus revealed to it concerning it. My name is Phila Rubin. On the December 22, 2024. It was a Sunday like any other. I woke up, got dressed, and headed to church, just as I had done countless times before. I had my usual seat right in the middle, where I could hear the choir's voices blend in perfect harmony. The service began as expected with songs, prayers, and then the sermon. That day the pastor spoke about tithing. It was a topic I had heard many times before, giving a portion of what we earn back to God. He quoted verses urging us to be faithful in our giving, promising that blessings would follow. As I sat there listening, I felt both a sense of duty and a bit of guilt. I had always given my tithe, even when it was hard, believing it was my way of securing God's favor. That next day, being 23rd of December 2024, started out like any other. I had finished my errands and was driving home, my mind filled with thoughts about the week ahead. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. But in just a few seconds everything changed. I didn't see the truck coming. I only heard the screech of tires and felt a violent impact as my car was thrown to the side. There was a sharp crash of glass, a crushing force, and then nothing. The moment I stood before him, I felt smaller than I had ever felt before. Jesus' presence was unlike anything I could describe, powerful yet filled with love. It wasn't just the way he looked, but the way he made me feel. It was as if he saw everything about me, things I had never spoken out loud, things I had forgotten, things I had hidden even from myself. There was no place to hide. Then, in an instant, my whole life appeared before me, like a story playing out from beginning to end. I saw every moment, every choice I had made, every word I had spoken, every secret thought I had ever had. At first, I wanted to turn away, to stop watching, but I couldn't. I had always thought of myself as a good person. I went to church every Sunday. I gave my tithes without fail. I helped when I could, followed the rules, and did my best to live a decent life. But now, seeing everything from his perspective, I realized something painful. So much of what I had done was out of habit, not love. I thought back to all the times I had dropped money into the offering basket, believing that I was doing the right thing. I had always heard that giving to God would bring blessings, that if I gave my 10%, He would take care of me. So I gave, not really thinking much about it. It was just something I was supposed to do. I never stopped to ask myself why. Now, Jesus was showing me the truth. Giving wasn't meant to be a rule that I followed to keep God happy. It wasn't supposed to be a business deal where I gave something and expected something in return. It was meant to be an act of trust, a way to say, God, everything I have is yours. But that wasn't how I had treated it. As I watched my life play out, I saw the way I had thought about tithing. I had taken pride in it, feeling good about myself for being faithful in giving. Deep down, I had even compared myself to others. When I saw people struggling to give or hesitating to put money in the offering, I had judged them. I never said it out loud, but I thought to myself, I'm doing what God wants. Why can't they? But now, Jesus was showing me how wrong I had been. My giving had become more about me than about Him. I had been more focused on making sure I gave the right amount than on having the right heart. I had treated it like a rule, something that made me a good Christian. But Jesus revealed to me that God had never wanted my money, He wanted my heart. I saw now that real giving wasn't about numbers or percentages. It wasn't about fear or duty. It was about trust. If I truly trusted God, I wouldn't just give out of habit. I would give because I loved Him, because I knew everything I had already belonged to Him. I would give freely without expecting something in return, without worrying about whether I had done enough. And that's when the painful truth hit me. I had spent so much time trying to follow the rules that I had missed the most important thing, my relationship with Him. I had been checking all the right boxes but forgetting to actually know and love the one I was doing it for. My faith had become a list of things I needed to do instead of a journey of walking with Him. As I stood there, fully exposed before Jesus, I felt both ashamed and relieved. Ashamed because I finally saw how wrong I had been, but relieved because, despite it all, He was still looking at me with love. He wasn't angry. He wasn't condemning me. He was showing me the truth because He wanted me to live differently. For the first time I understood. Faith wasn't about following rules, it was about knowing Him. Worship wasn't about rituals, it was about a heart that truly loved Him. And giving wasn't about numbers, it was about trust. At that moment, I knew I could never go back to the way things were. As these realizations filled my heart, He made it clear that true worship wasn't about following rituals. It wasn't about carefully calculating a percentage or making sure I met a requirement. True worship was about surrender, about giving my whole heart to God, not just a part of my income. I had spent years believing that as long as I gave my tithe, I was doing what God expected. But now I saw the truth. Giving wasn't meant to be about rules or fear. It wasn't supposed to feel like a burden or a duty. Instead, it was meant to be an act of love, a reflection of my trust in Him. He revealed to me that when tithing comes from a place of love rather than obligation, it becomes meaningful. But when it is done simply to follow a rule, it loses its true purpose. At that moment, I felt both broken and renewed. I had spent so much of my life trying to do things the right way, yet I had missed what mattered most. Jesus had opened my eyes, and now I could never see tithing or my relationship with God the same way again. Then, He allowed me to see something beyond anything I could have imagined. In an instant, I found myself in a place filled with joy unlike anything on earth. The sky shimmered with colors so vibrant and pure that they looked alive. A song of perfect harmony filled the air, and though I couldn't see where it came from, I felt it deep in my soul. All around me, people stood together in worship. Their faces shone with peace and love, their voices lifted in praise that came straight from their hearts. There was no fear, no pain, only a deep connection with God, a perfect unity with Him. In that moment, I understood what true worship looked like. It wasn't forced or expected, it wasn't done out of habit or obligation. It flowed naturally from hearts that truly knew and loved God. I longed to stay there forever. But then everything changed. The warmth and light faded, replaced by a heavy darkness. A deep sorrow filled the air, a pain that wasn't physical but reached into the soul. I heard voices crying out, but there was no peace in their words. I saw people lost in their own choices, weighed down by regret. They were separated from the presence of God, and though they longed to reach Him, they couldn't. The weight of selfishness, pride, and unrepentance hung over them like an unshakable burden. There was no joy, no comfort, only emptiness. The pain wasn't from punishment but from being completely cut off from the one who gave life, love, and meaning. As I stood there, I understood the weight of my own decisions. I had spent so much time focusing on religious acts while keeping parts of my heart distant from Him. I had followed rules, thinking they would make me right with God, but I had never fully surrendered myself to Him. Now, I could see the difference between a life truly given to God and one lived apart from Him. It wasn't about how much I gave, how many times I prayed, or how often I went to church. It was about my heart, my choices, and what I truly lived for. At that moment, the truth became clear: what I chose to value, what I chose to live for, would determine where my heart truly belonged. He made it clear that I didn't have to continue on the same path. There was still time to live differently, to truly know him rather than just follow rules. The weight of everything I had seen and felt was overwhelming, but his invitation gave me hope. It wasn't about earning his love, it had never been. It was about walking with him, trusting him, and letting my life be changed by that relationship. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my room. The world around me looked the same, but inside, everything felt different. I had been given another chance, and I couldn't waste it. I no longer saw faith as something I had to perform, it was now something I wanted to live. My priorities shifted. Prayer wasn't a duty, it became a conversation. Worship wasn't just about singing, it became a way of life. Giving wasn't about obligation, it became an act of love. This was the beginning of a transformed life, not because I had tried harder, but because I had finally understood what it meant to truly follow him. At first, old habits pulled at me. The need to prove my faith through actions, the guilt of not giving enough, the fear of not doing things the right way, it all weighed heavily on me. The pressure to tithe had always been there, as if my giving determined my worth in God's eyes. I had treated it as a transaction, expecting blessings in return, rather than a genuine act of trust. But now, I saw it differently. He revealed that giving wasn't about fulfilling an obligation, it was about surrender. It wasn't about numbers or percentages, but about a heart that trusted him completely. True freedom wasn't found in strict religious duties, but in walking closely with him, knowing that he was my provider, my guide, and my greatest treasure. For the first time, I gave without fear. I worshipped without performance. I followed him without the burden of trying to earn his love. This was freedom, the kind that only came through true surrender.